Welcome to Just One Q. I'm Dr. Melissa Horne, a diversity, equity, and inclusion advocate. In this podcast, I chat with industry experts and thought leaders about the latest trends related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Each episode, I ask just one question tied to current events. The goal is to leave you with the tools that you need to drive change in your own life, both personally and professionally. So for those doing IDEA or DEI work, we know how important leadership buy-in and support for these initiatives are to their sustainability and ultimately to their success. But in many companies, DEI or IDEA practices are seen as an add-on or additional work that leaders need to focus on rather than a set of practices that are central to their role. So for today's question, I'm asking, how do you interweave IDEA and well-being practices into how leaders are coached and developed? And to answer this question, joining me today is Victoria Rodgers. Victoria, thank you so much for being here.
Hello, thank you. Thank you. I'm super excited and I feel like we are overdue.
Absolutely. So before we answer the question, I just want to tell you a little bit about Victoria. Victoria is an IDEA Strategy Consultant and Facilitator for CenteredSoul Consulting. Victoria focuses on the integration of IDEA, inclusivity, diversity, equity, and accessibility across the employee experience and ways of working, including communication, team dynamics, leadership development, and problem solving to improve decision-making and activate on strategic priorities. She believes in holistic approaches to development, including coaching, spaces for curious, inclusive conversations, and tactical mindfulness practices that can create more conscious leaders that will change the world. Previously, Victoria served as IDEA Strategy Director for Tier 1 Performance to stand up their internal practice and external offerings for their clients. In that role, she identified systemic changes, established cultural and strategic practices to drive inclusive behaviors, to influence Tier 1's journey to conscious allyship of its people. She serves as a strategy consultant for Fortune 500 companies across the U.S. and abroad to support their activation on diversity, equity, and inclusion, leadership development, performance coaching, and facilitation. One of her passions is the interweaving of mindfulness within the ways of working, which leverages her meditation teacher training and energy leadership coaching studies. Victoria, thank you so much for being here. I always love reading biographies. Often they're so telling about sort of what each person brings to their work in this space. And I think it's really neat because the question that we centered on today is how do we interweave IDEA and well-being practices into how leaders are coached and developed. And it sort of seems like it's kind of bringing together all the different areas of practice that you embody. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know that this is a topic that you have a lot to say on.
No, I love it. It's a great topic. And the reason why I appreciate it and even why I started to move into this space is because I recognize there is so much hesitancy and tension that shows up when the phrasing of diversity, equity, inclusion, even accessibility, when it's entered into a conversation, right? When you have leaders that don't understand truly the why and the how. And it's the same thing as well-being, right? You hear about organizations that have initiatives like DE&I, but then they also have initiatives that are focused on well-being. And the challenge is that they are just that. They are handled as initiatives and not truly integrated within the fabric of how the business operates, right? And so it's really important. What I've leaned into over the past few years is how do you create spaces to allow for people to have true inclusive conversations that go deep into, with curiosity, with some bravery, reserving judgment, being present, to unpack some of the tension, some of the hesitancy that people have around a wide variety of topics, right? Because I don't care what you do. It's not about reading a book to understand how to embrace diversity, essentially the uniqueness in all of us. There's not an assessment that is just going to give you everything that you need to know. You have to be able to pair what it is that you learn for your lived experiences and your brain. And then also in the body, like being able to truly be connected with other people while having a space to be able to verbalize and socialize what it is that you're learning and what you actually need to unlearn. And that has to happen within spaces that often is well suited for workplace, right? Because that's where people are learning each other's boundaries. They're learning about their teammates' uniqueness. They're learning about their teammates, where there's tension, right? When they're collaborating. And that's where some of these topics may come up. And it's not just about race and ethnicity and gender. It's about the widespread of what diversity actually is. And those challenges and those tension and the awareness of it show up in the workplace. So you have to be able to care for it that way. But it's also, we're talking about the whole person at the end of the day, right? The whole person, the system that supports the whole person. And so well-being is a part of that. And, so all of us operate within organizations or along with organizations that are focused on high performance. But we can't get to high performance if we can't incorporate wellness practices within the way that we work, right? And so I look at that integration of wellness, well-being, caring for that, integrating that within the work, the same way that I look at IDEA, all facets of IDEA, and how do we integrate that within the work? Because that's going to allow for the whole person to show up in their workspace, at home, in the communities that they serve, et cetera, et cetera.
I know that a lot of times people are like, okay, so I do my inclusive leadership training. They sort of compartmentalize this, right? Rather than they'll say, okay, well, we're going to focus on wellness. We'll focus on, IDEA or DEI stuff. And then I just, I lead day to day. And I think your argument or what you're saying is that they can't be segmented or separated, right? This isn't an add-on. This isn't in addition to the work that you're doing. In order to be an effective leader, in order to succeed in your role, that these practices, these ways of being and thinking and doing need to be integrated into your everyday dealings with folks.
That's
so how
right.
do we get there? How do we move from sort of like this add-on, in addition to versus like, integration of these practices?
So there's a couple of things that come to mind. One, it's when you think about high performance culture, what does that mean to you? And what is it that is not being discussed, not being talked about, where there's tension? I call it the tensions of reality that exist. And being willing to first explore what some of those tensions are that exist within an organization. What are the things that we don't want to talk about, but we keep hearing that they're showing up in employee surveys or they're showing up in conflicts that need to be resolved? It's thinking about sometimes it's the breakdown of silos within organizations. Where does the tension exist? And let's be willing to peel back what's happening, right? And then figuring out, so what is it that people need to learn and what is it that they need to unlearn about these tensions? And then being able to incorporate some of it within the way of work. So for example, an example that I would share is around addressing burnout, right? And so addressing burnout is one thing that we all know about. And some people don't really believe in it, and some people do. But at the end of the day, let's try to pull back some of the things. When we start to peel back burnout and some of the symptoms of it and the things that lead to it, at the end of the day, we have to figure out what are some of the new rhythms and routines that we need to create in order for people to be able to respect the boundaries or new boundaries that need to be created to allow for people to do their best work. So it could be something as simple as figuring out, we have out of office notifications that happen. People go on vacation. We have to lead by example as leaders. What is the practice that I need to do? What do I need to demonstrate for my people that shows I'm honoring my boundaries and I'm honoring your boundaries? Maybe it's not replying to the emails while you are supposed to be away on vacation.
Yeah.
Maybe it's these space breaks. And I see this that's adopted within organizations. I've even recommended them. What happens if you utilize the technology that you have, like Outlook, and actually scheduling space breaks that are necessary for you to have space away from the hustle and the bustle of going to the next meeting and the next meeting and the next meeting. And if you notice, there are so many tools that are actually available within some of these clients, like Outlook has a focus tool and all those things. But if you diligently utilize that type of application to create space breaks for the intention of literally getting up away from your desk, going to breathe, going to walk, playing some music, having a dance party in the house, whatever it is that you're doing, that space break, and then you encourage your teammates to have space breaks.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't even matter if it's like 10 minutes from that, but what does that look like? And now all of a sudden, that's a new boundary that you can create, right? And then with that, it's having a conversation with people about where are they feeling powerless in scenarios within the workplace, because you have, the stories that we tell ourselves,
right?
They formulate these limited beliefs. Where are the areas that people feel like they're powerless? And I say that because that has to be a part of the conversation that contributes to addressing burnout. Mm-hmm. People tend to feel like, oh, these things are just happening to me and I can't control it. These decisions are just being made for me and I can't control it. We are working towards this deadline on a project, but I don't know if I could take my vacation time right now, even though I promised my family that I would do it. Maybe I'll delay it for the purpose of the business. But this is also what contributes to people feeling like they have to do something, and we're not creating a space for them to be able to talk about it. And the reason why this shows up in a well-being conversation and a DE&I conversation is because now we have to be more diligent about how we're creating these environments to be more inclusive of the needs that people have and caring for those needs and making the environment accessible enough to where people know, you know what, we're going to make adjustments to the system and adjustments to certain things to allow for you to manage what needs to be managed, or for you to care for your health or care for your family and those things. And that's why I say, Melissa, there's an interweaving that's happening with well-being and IDEA together. That is how you can truly start to think about, oh, okay, we need to re-examine our rhythm and our routine, and we need to come up with new practices and new boundaries for our people so they know how to protect their time and we actually honor it.
Yeah, it was interesting because we use Slack, which is great. And it's supposed to be an asynchronous tool, right? But we were using it as a synchronous tool. And so, it becomes this thing where you're like, okay, I got to get in touch with this person to move on, and I can't. Right. And it's like, okay, well, this isn't working. But then people are like, well, I'm in the flow right now. I'm in the zone. Like, I'm trying to stay in this, zone because, I've got many competing priorities, but I gotta stay in a workflow. So we went with a stoplight system. So basically, green meant open to chat. You connect with me. I can be interrupted basically. A yellow was like, I'm probably doing something. So if you need to interrupt me, no problem. And then we switched to sort of red, heads down, which was an indication of like, okay, I'm focusing right now. And it was really interesting because people were like, well, hesitant at first, but once we started to do that, it was like, okay, all the urgency kind of went away. And it was like, oh, I can, I've seen other folks do it. I can put my head down now. And, it's amazing. Things sort of felt like they were going so busy. And I had like uninterrupted 2 hours of work one day because everyone's head was down and I was, it was awesome. It was amazing. Right. But I love the idea that you got to model it as well, right? Like you have to stick to it, because if you're not sticking to it for yourself and modeling that behavior and honoring it for yourself, it's hard for other folks to sort of do that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you shared that example. Isn't it powerful how you have green, yellow, and red? It's like a universal symbol
Yeah.
I have used the green, yellow, red model and interweaved within how you kick off a meeting. So and it's a fun practice. It's like a well-being scan, how people are arriving into a space. You and I both know we can work in some very fast-paced environments where people are shifting from one meeting to another. They're just running. And there's not enough time to just stop and pause, right? The only way for us to be great leaders is by practicing presence. This is where mindfulness starts to come in.
Yeah.
What if people arrive at a meeting and we invite people to breathe and take another deep breath and even ask the question of, how are you feeling right now in this moment? Green, I'm ready to go, right? I'm good. Things are clicking. I found a flow today, to your point. I'm ready to go. I'm in a good space. Yellow, I might be somewhere in between, right? I have a few distractions, but I'm here. Red, you might need to extend me some grace today, right? My body might be feeling a kind of way. My mental might be feeling a kind of way, but just giving people that second to just breathe and scan real quick. Like, how are you feeling in this moment? And then asking the question of, what do you need? What can we be mindful of for you in this moment? Now, I know that, a lot of people are going to say, but we have to maximize on an hour. But then you think about it in the long run. You are demonstrating empathy. You're giving space for your people to be able to shift and to be present in this particular meeting. You are recognizing that, you know what? I know people are coming and they're running, and I want to be able to create space for you to breathe and arrive, right? And when we think about performance, it's impossible to do your best work if you're just jumping right in without regard for what it is that you might need in that moment, or without regard for what it is that other people might need in that moment. And the last thing that you also gain is that as leaders, we have an opportunity to keep the pulse on our people. We can see the signs if we just give ourselves the opportunity to check in. And these check-ins can show up in a wide variety of ways, but I've integrated them within programs and have deployed it within an organization as a general practice. And guess what? It can show up as a rhythm, your new ways of being. And that is honoring the individual. It's a part of the IDEA work. It's creating a more accessible environment for people. And it's also caring for the well-being of people. So I love that you brought up that green, yellow, red, because it's something that can be adopted and integrated within a wide variety of spaces.
Yeah, it was a real game changer for us. And you just get into the habit of just like pinging people. I was like, okay, maybe I can just take a break then, if like they're busy doing something else and I can take a second and figure out, okay, they're working on something else, no problem. I can shift to something else as well. I really like that idea about the meeting as well. And I often wonder if the folks who are sort of, feeling red, if there's a way, depending on whether it's being recorded, to even just bow out as well, right? Not to feel, because that gives people the opportunity just to say, I'm not really here right now. And so you're not getting the best of me.
I have witnessed that many times as facilitating a leadership program recently, and had a couple of people that were, it's like, I'm not here. It's like, you know what? So let's take a pause real quick. Yeah. Because this session, we need all the brain power. We need, people to feel the synergy with each other and to be able to actually be present, right? And so let's look at calendars. What does this look like? Or if you bow out, what do we need to make sure to do to include you? And sometimes people need to bow out and they don't even necessarily have to be there anyway, because how many times have we been on meetings and we don't necessarily have to be there, right? And so to your point, it's caring for a more accessible environment for people. You know, if you're not there, you're not there. And sometimes it can do way more damage by trying to have someone, in essence, violate their sovereignty. And if we start to look at things that way, then we are allowing ourselves to bring in or honor just a greater level of humanity in our work, because we are people, we're not machines and robots. There's plenty of them being built, but we're not those.
I wanted to circle back to something that you had said at the beginning. It was the modeling of this. And I think that there's so much learning that you can do. And, you know, I believe in learning and unlearning, but I also think, and what you're sort of really honing in on here is the idea that we have to practice these ways of being, ways of working.
That's right.
As leaders, right? Like that there's only so many articles you can read, only so many sessions you can attend. But if you're not actually putting into practice yourself these things, then it's not going to be part of what you do. And I think that's really kind of like that key there that people are often missing is that, okay, I've read the book. Okay, great. I know. Yeah. But we have to actually put these things into practice and do them. And I like that you tie that into the, you know, new rhythms and routines, because the way I think that you lead and support your teams is by actually doing these things. Because you can say, take the vacation that you want, but if you're answering your email, what are you signaling to your employees while they're on vacation, right? What are the expectations? What are the practices that you're sort of demonstrating? So I really like this idea. And I think it's really empowering to say, like, you can put these things into practice yourself and it will better your well-being as well.
Well, and that's the demonstration is critical, because think about a level of transparency that you need to create for your people. The transparency really comes from you being able to deliver a very authentic message, right? And be able to say, you know what, I'm asking this of you, but I actually did it first, right? So this is something that I learned. This is what I now have unlearned, right? And transparently, here's what I've been experimenting with. And what's the story? Like, tell us the story, because we also learn through stories. And what greater way to be able to say, I practiced X, or I experimented with Y, and this is what I learned. And I would like for you all to try it out yourself, because it's unfair to require your people to adopt a new behavior that you yourself haven't tried, right? Being able to not only demonstrate it, but also being able to tell the story of, like, yeah, it worked. Here was the pitfall. Here's how I adjusted for me. It also allows for people to see you as a leader as more human. Demonstration is also a part of what you need to be able to observe, like observable behaviors. Like, you need to be able to observe that you're caring for your mental health and well-being. You need to be able to observe that you're doing certain things. And so it's important to be able to demonstrate, storytell, ask, and then check in, you know, and that's the other thing too, right? It's checking in, seeing how things are going, being willing to receive the feedback, being willing to, quite frankly, create the space to say, what else can we be doing different? Because, you know, I think we tend to discount being open to the feedback and being open to the unique perspectives that people bring, especially now that the workforce is so diverse generationally. And we're not even going to layer on top of that the ethnicity and all of the other things. But like, there's some real power in being able to solicit the thoughts and the feedback from people. And maybe, how do they want to be able to work? How do they want to be able to socialize some of the unique perspectives and skills that they bring, you know, to the table too?
You and I always have really awesome conversations, but before we close out, I want to know, you know, what's the one thing you'd like our listeners to take away from our conversation today? And we've covered a lot of ground, but, you know, if folks are to sort of remember one key thing from this, what would you hope that would be?
Such a great question. The one thing that I would like people to remember is that caring for the human in front of you, because we're talking about workplaces, caring for the human in front of you doesn't have to be this heavy lift. It can be something that truly is about you leaning into the unique needs of people with empathy. And so that is how you can also lean into DE&I and well-being. It's with empathy. And so how are you showing up with empathy today is the big question. And what are you getting curious about is my follow-up. And I think those two questions are, will perhaps help them with realizing the greater humanity in the people that are in front of them. It is just that. DE&I is not that scary.
No, and I think that's it. Like curiosity, just asking a great open-ended question. Tell me about how your day is going. Tell me about how your week is going. You learn so much, from folks, more than you probably thought. And it's a simple moment. It's a simple tactic, but it's a great way to elicit so much feedback.
It is truly the demonstration of emotional intelligence. I tell people often emotional intelligence, if we can just start there in the journey to being a more inclusive leader and recognizing diversity and creating more accessible environments. It starts with emotional intelligence. And so even if it's you working on self-awareness and how you're arriving and being present and showing up with empathy, being able to regulate your emotions, being able to reflect on your triggers and traps and get curious about why something triggered you, or get curious about why you don't want to talk about something, or why a certain subject matter makes you uncomfortable. And going deeper into that exploration, that is a entry point into the true journey of recognizing inclusion and being inclusive. And so it can be that simple, and it doesn't have to be branded as DE&I, but I do want people to know that when you're caring for this, it has a direct impact on this. So when you're caring for this, it allows for you to recognize diversity. It allows for you to tackle bias. It allows for you to be able to recognize what you need to show up as your best self in an environment.
Victoria, I can't thank you enough for being here today, for sharing your experience, for sharing your knowledge and your expertise. For those who are interested in learning more about you and your work or keeping up with you, where can they go?
LinkedIn. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Victoria L. Rodgers on LinkedIn. In your search, it may show up as Victoria L. Rodgers MBA. But that is how you can find me and connect. Get curious with me.
And we'll put your contact details in the show notes as well. Again, thank you so much. I always really enjoy our conversations, and I always learn something new. And, that's why I love doing this show. That's why I love connecting with the folks who are on the show, because I learn and take away so much every time and from every single episode. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. And thank you for showing up so big and brave and inquisitive. Really appreciate the partnership with you, Melissa.
And for those of you listening, if you have any of your own questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Until next time, I'm Dr. Melissa Horne, and this is Just One Q.